mullein.
You got a lot of it? So I have a theory about why it's not really growing on my property right now, and this has some of what to do with its ecological uses, and how it can help with soil restoration. And again, anything with the really big leaves make excellent green manure, mulching for your garden and so forth. But it also tends to like drier, disturbed areas. And the first couple years with my garden, it was drier and more disturbed. But I'm transitioning into a no-till practice, so the ground is disturbed considerably less than tilling. And so I think it's just like, okay, maybe it's done here. I mean, I'm sure there's still a seed bank in the ground, but enough other stuff has grown up and it's keeping the whole area moister, and keeping it from forming really compacted soil, and it's just not necessarily the conditions that that plant likes, but it is why you'll see. I have a neighbor in the cove I live in who did a controlled burn on his hillside all last summer, and the mullein is going crazy in all of the areas that they burned. So it's definitely a first in a lot of cases with sort of that transitioning habitat restoration. Of course, it's a flowering plant, so pollinators like it. The flowers are, the leaf gets a lot of attention for the smoke glands, for making teas to help with spasmodic cough. It has a lot of respiratory connection. And I will say on the smoking angle, anything you read online will be like, and you can smoke it. It's been shown that the constituents are not any more beneficial doing that. And in fact, the irritation from the smoking really kind of nullifies the benefit. If you could just easily take it as a tea or a syrup and get the same benefit, why not do that? So I don't generally encourage the smoking of it, though historically it has been done. But there was actually a study in 2002 done by Clemson University that found that the bactericidal properties in the flowers were just off the charts, and they tested it positively against and killing Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermis, E. coli, and this was a new one to me, Klebsiella pneumonia. But those are some pretty heavy hitters, and those flowers are just like, eh. The flowers are edible. You can put them in a salad. You can make tea with them. The flowers in more commercial use, you'll see come up more often in ear oils. So I included a recipe to make your own ear oil. However, even though it does have bactericidal properties, it's also really good for inflammation control. So one of its functions in the ear oil is as a pain dulling agent. So you'll see garlic paired with ear oils a lot because the garlic's going in there and people are, oh yeah, the garlic's killing off the bad stuff. Well, now we know the flowers probably are too, but the flowers are also going in behind and helping just soothing the pain associated with the earache too. Something I dug up just in the process of compiling this booklet, which was just like, this is some next level stuff, but it's pretty cool and I want to experiment with it. There's some thoughts more with traditional herbalism that the plants allude to their use. I don't think this is scientifically verified, but it's pretty uncanny if you think about, like, say, when you cut a tomato in half and what that looks like and what we know now of the lycopene content of tomatoes and how good it is for heart health and vascular system and stuff. What does that tomato look like? Well, mullein, the first year it comes up, it just kind of looks like a big fluffy rose or cabbage on the ground. It doesn't flower. It's saving up all its energy so that the next year it can send up this huge stalk and it can get taller than I am. It just depends on how disturbed the area is, typically how tall it gets. But it takes so much energy to send that big stalk up and flower it all out before it totally dies away. So I was reading this one super woodsy lady's blog where she was talking about all the historical uses of the plant for inflammation control, which I was aware of. I mean, some people will use it for pain. I wouldn't necessarily say it's as studied or known for total pain relief as much as like turmeric or something would be by comparison, but it has its role. But using that sort of law of similars where the plant is telling you something, She had suffered back surgery and was having ongoing complications from it. And she thought about, we already know this plant can help with inflammation and pain. And what is it doing? It's concentrating out all its energy to put up this big, sturdy spine and just put all this energy into that spine. And so she started to use it as in a topical and in a tincture to help with her back pain. And as of her last blog post about it, was saying that she noticed results. So I immediately called my mom, who's been suffering back problems. I was like, "Can you be my guinea pig? Will you try some mullein?" So we'll see.
That's awesome.
Other historical uses, the fire tinder. People would take the heads and dip it in tallow or pine tar, and then they could use it as a long burning torch. And then I have found that if you dry it and crumble it up, you can use it in hens as a nesting, in their nest boxes, nesting material for hens. And then, of course, you'll see all the jokes online if you start looking up things about mullein. Cowboy toilet paper. The leaves are soft, and they're not going to hurt you to use them. Although I will say it's also known as Quaker's Rouge, because women would rub it on their cheeks if they maybe for religious reasons didn't believe in using cosmetics, or financially couldn't afford cosmetics. They might rough up their cheeks with the plant and to get some color. So it may or may not do that in other areas too if you're using it in other ways. So caution, exercise caution. Over 46 known active compounds studied in that plant so far. So there's surprisingly more information out there than I was even aware of for what is often not a very commonly talked about plant.
And the one you have pictured is with this one spike going up?
Yeah, the other
Olympus?
more common.
And then there's another one that's a candelabra.
Yeah, and that one isn't, it does grow around here, but it's not terribly common. It's more common out west. So I just included the grape, called the grape, which is the more single stalk variety, because I know for a fact that that's everywhere around here, going down the outer road and whatnot. All the different types of mullein have the similar constituents, so you could use them interchangeably. So the ID on that is a little less critical, where you're like, oh, I can only use the 5-pronged one for this and the single French one, but that doesn't matter. It's nitrogen fixing. That's one of its components for what it's doing for the soil. So when people talk about cover cropping, they've stripped the soil because they kept growing corn there or something, and they need to rebuild the soil, they'll plant cover crop, and usually it's a legume family plant, which this is not, but it happens to be a nitrogen fixing plant. So that's part of the reason why you'll see it go into heavily disturbed areas as something that's actually bringing the soil back to life again to encourage other growth around it. So I think that's kind of what was happening in my garden, and then the other growth came in. Contraindications: don't smoke it if you don't have to. Strain the hairs out if you're going to make a tea or tincture. It doesn't hurt you to consume the hairs, but if you're really sick and you're going to be drinking a lot of tea, those hairs can start to get irritant. So just use like a fine mesh strainer or a muslin cloth to get the hairs out before you drink your tea. Because they're doing some research with it in relation to blood sugar effects and so forth. Obviously, if you're a diabetic, you might want to exercise caution. They haven't substantiated it a lot yet, but they have enough, I guess, to put that warning out there. It has potential diuretic effects too. So again, we're talking about keeping your minerals in balance if you're going to be drinking a lot of it, and it might flush your system. Although it wouldn't do it as strongly as some of these other greens we were talking about. And lastly, we come to the lowly plantain, not related to the banana-like fruit at the grocery store. I honestly have no idea how they both managed to get that common name. If you look at the Latin botanical name, they're not in any way related. There are over 200 plantago species, not many in this country, and what are here, once again, were brought here, whether intentionally or not. In fact, there's Native American folklore that refer to the plant as white man's footprint, because anywhere that the settlers went, this plant would pop up, whether that was just because it liked disturbed areas and there was the foot traffic, or if they were Johnny Appleseeding it as they went, I don't know. But there's two primary ones that grow around here. The Plantago lanceolata, or lance leaf, is the narrow leaf, is the most common name for it. Sometimes snake leaf, because when it grows, it'll like twist and kind of looks like a snake's head. These are so wilty right now. When they're out in your yard, they tend to be pretty stiff, tough plants. I brought two flower heads because I wanted to show you. Most of the time you'll see these little ones and they'll look like they have a little white tutu around them for the flowers. But depending on where they're growing, and if they're not disturbed a lot, they can get really big heads on them too, and this will still form a little tutu, but don't necessarily think that these are two different things. They're just different ecozones on the property. Same leaf though, and that'll give it away. These leaves are edible, but they are full of threads, worse than celery almost. So they are hard to eat. If you want to put them in a salad, I would do it when they are just teeny tiny at the very, very beginning of spring, because you'll be chewing that forever to break those strings down. The broadleaf variety sends up a different kind of flower. This stays closer to the ground, and the leaves are very bushy and wide. So the recipe I included for you all is a plantain chip recipe, because people are all into making kale chips at home, and these, when they're fresh picked, are a dense enough material that they will hold up to cooking like a kale chip, and then you can have a lot more for cheap in your backyard. And it's even shaped like a chip, so how fun is that? The flower heads are primarily used as a fiber source. I mean, you know, if you're eating enough plant material in your diet, that's probably overrated. I wouldn't go through the trouble of harvesting a million plantain seeds. But actually, the common fiber supplement that's sold, psyllium, or psyllium husk, is a plantain species. So commercially, it is grown, not this exact one, it's another in the family, but it's grown commercially to be sold as Metamucil, essentially. So there's a storied use of plantain that is still with us in our culture today, whether people are aware of it or not. I actually have to just read this to you because it's off the charts what this plant does. These are all the things it has been used for and generally verified for. It runs the gamut. Disinfectant for cuts, scrapes, burns, stopping itch, insect bites, eczema, psoriasis, poison ivy, any kind of rash, sunburn, mouthwash, laxative, fiber supplement, swelling, pain, arthritis, jaundice, diarrhea, ulcers, colitis, gastritis, enteritis, and other digestive problems, ear infections, edema, which is the swelling with fluid, hay fever, which is your main common seasonal allergy, cough, bronchitis, laryngitis, tuberculosis, fever, cancer, weight loss, impotence, hemorrhoids, cradle cap diaper rash, and ringworm, all of which are fungal manifestations on the skin, cholesterol management, headaches, drawing out splinters, and drawing out poison from venoms from bites or stings. Topical and internal. It's insane how this plant is everywhere, and nobody pays it a second mind. In fact, as a kid,
I was going to say,
I just called
shoot
them.
them.
You know about it. So many
yes.
people are like, "What?" I'm like, "It's a shooter. It's a shooter."
That's how they were
If it
everywhere.
were stiff, if it were still stiff, you could bend the stalk around it and then slide the stalk up and it would. So that's how I grew up messing with them, and then it's like, oh, by the way, this does, everything for you.
You can even play games
That's
with
why
it.
a lot of people spread them so much. Me and you were shooting them all the time.
It's all those kindergartners. It's an alternative to flax as a fiber. The leaves can be in a salad. I would say if you're going to do something, the pesto, something where it's going to be really more broken down is probably going to be the most tasty way to ingest it, just to break those fibers down. It was considered one of the 9 sacred herbs of the Anglo-Saxon people, and they wrote about it even in their poetry, calling it the mother of herbs and heal-all. And I think it kind of attests to the heal-all based on all the things it's been used for. The seeds were also used as a starch for stiffening fabrics. that was new news to me. I was like, who stickens their fabrics? That used to be more of a thing.
People that iron clothes.
And there, the parts of the plant, and depending on when harvested, can also be used to make gold or brown shade dyes. I have to tell that to some of my fiber friends and see if they want to experiment. That was pretty cool. So ecologically, and this has a lot to do with why we see it where we do, it is amazing at breaking up hard painted soil. So that's something that's been heavily, heavily trodden, whether it's by feet, by cars, by livestock, or even over-tilling. So farmers will suffer hard pan if they just till, and they're not taking care of their soil. They've broken the structure of the soil down till it's almost silt fine microscopic particles, and it just locks into place, and then nothing can get through it. No good beneficial microorganisms want to live in it anymore, so no bugs come to check out the microorganisms, and so no plants can grow, no mushroom mycelium can spread, and you have a dead zone. So I've heard it referred to before as Mother Nature's Band-Aid because of all the things that it can do for us. So, and circling back around to the nettle and what you were talking about rubbing on, you can, if you take the leaf, and I've found that it maybe works a little better with the broadleaf, but maybe just because that one's easier to chew, in a pinch, right? Chew it up, make a little wet, spit-filled poultice, and you put it on a bug bite, put it on your poison ivy, and if you're out in the field and you need quick relief, I imagine it would probably do the same for the inflammation control from a nettle sting too, although I haven't
They're
tried
usually
it.
beside each other, which ones will do.
Well, plantain
Black
being
pepper.
has the potential to be beside anything, so I don't know how much I've gauged just that, but yeah, I led with the dandelion because everybody's like, oh yeah, dandelion, and then finished with the lowly plantain because it does so much, it pays it any mind. So just to go over a few things here, I feature this brand line locally made by my friend Jennifer here in the back, who's our camerawoman for the night, Sea Willow Herbs, and she does infused oils from wild crafted weeds. So she's got chickweed, which we didn't go over, but chickweed's in her oils. She uses plantain in a lot of her oils. She infuses it over a long period of time into extra virgin olive oil, and then takes that infused oil to use medicinally in topical salves. So we formulated this tattoo balm, which I used to heal these up when I got them down the street at Toki Tattoo. Works very well, and I actually have a friend who has a 1-year-old who's been having a lot of skin rash issues on his face that literally nothing was helping, and they'd gone to the doctor over and over and over again. And she was like, well, this is good for healing any kind of red irritated skin, right? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, tattoo's more of a selling point. She's like, well, I'll try it on him, and if it doesn't work, then I'll have it around for next time I get a tattoo. But she came back, I saw her again, it was not quite 2 weeks later, and his face was the best I've literally seen it in months. I mean, there was like no sign of anything, which is a cool testimony. Then there's the wild weed salve, which is just kind of a basic herbal first aid kit type of salve. We've got a muscle balm. So they'll have essential oils and other things in it to have a certain property. But the base note in all the products is those infused weed oils, which is really cool. And then Pangea plants.
What temperature do you infuse your
I don't. It's a cold infusion.
cold infusion?
Yeah, for 6 weeks in kind of a out of the sun,
Wow,
cool area.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pangea Plants is a certified biodynamic medicinal herb farm down in Lake Lure, North Carolina. Biodynamic farming was developed by a German farmer, and I like to refer to it as organic 2.0. I mean, if you think about all the wonderful things you hear about why organic is so good, biodynamic takes that to entirely different levels, and even to an esoteric spiritual degree. But it's been proven to work at how much more robust the plants can be by following the principles of biodynamic farming. And it is not easy to do, and it is definitely not easy to get certified in. I mean, sometimes they have to bring people over from Europe just to evaluate the farm and do the certification. I think there's one certification organization, at least one now in North America, but he's certified. That is a huge deal. I mean, he made herbal presses across the country when that happened, and he's just here locally, and we have his stuff. So if you're like, well, I don't really feel like going out and hunting down some stinging nettle, here it is, already dry, ready to go. And then this is just an example of some other products. Both of these syrups, this has mullein. This one actually uses plantain, which I was like, good for you, Gaia, because nobody commercially uses plantain. And here they are, one of the big power players in the industry, and they're like, you know what? We will use some plantain in this one little formula, but it's great. And then nettle and its various allergy supportive forms. I brought some books here from my collection at home. These are really good guides. This one's for edibles in Eastern and Central North America, and this one is specifically medicinal. And these are really handy because they're small enough to travel with out in the field, but they have, if not really good photos, also really good diagrams and descriptions. So you really want to try to be as thorough as possible. Everything we talked about tonight doesn't really have any dangerous lookalikes, so it's pretty safe territory. But the further down the rabbit hole you want to go with wild foraging and stuff, the better it is to be informed. This is a really good step-by-step guide to do a lot of in-home medicine making, and most herbal books will pay some lip service to the process and provide some recipes, which this one does do, but this one gets a little bit more detailed into technique and different types of tools and things to have on hand if you're gonna start getting a little more serious about doing your own in-home medicine, so that's nice. An herbal first aid book. There's a number on the market. I've always really liked this one because it's little and simple and easy to keep in your backpack. It was written by a gentleman who studied under Dr. John Christopher, who was a renowned herbalist in our country. I forget when he passed away, but he left a legacy, and he was an author, and there's still a school in existence to his name, which I provided a link to down here if you wanted to check it out online. But he used a lot of Dr. Christopher's school of thought to formulate everything that's in this book, and there is overlap with some of these herbs, which is why I thought to bring it. Common or lesser burdock. There's a few different burdock species. This is the primary one that grows around here. It is not the same as the one that's consumed a lot in Asian food and used in Chinese medicine, but it's related and has a lot of similar properties as a blood cleanser and helping with skin irritations. Yarrow, the flower is primarily used, although you can use the leaf too, but the flower is really where most of the constituents are at as far as for the immune system, cold, flu, fever. Wound healing if you're doing it topically. It's also an important herb used in biodynamic preparations. So when I was saying biodynamic goes off in a world all its own, it has its own recipes and concoctions that they make using herbs that they then use to infuse back onto the plants that they're growing. So this acts as is actually kind of like in part of their fertilizer mixes as a key, like specifically it has to be yarrow kind of thing. Chicory, that's one of the dandelion lookalikes in leaf, not in flower form, and it's in bloom everywhere right now. It's the really pretty lacy looking purpley blue flowers that are lining the highway. But if you can find it on your property, the leaves, you can eat them, but the root is really the primary thing we've historically used. Again, roasting it as a coffee substitute. Personally, I think it tastes way better than dandelion. It's a little bit, almost, when you roast it down, it has a little bit more of like a fruity taste, or almost similar to a carob or something like that. It's pretty good, a good warm drink in the winter time. Self-heal is a little purple flower that's popping up around here right now. It's not as common in disturbed areas, so it's arguable maybe whether you would want to call it a weed or not. It's not something that's common enough that people think of it as a weed. It's in the mint family, so a lot of the same like astringent and cooling properties apply, although not as strong as like a peppermint or spearmint. Its common name, self-heal, would make you think that it's used for way more than it honestly typically is at this point. And I think it might have just been historically based on its availability to the people who made use of it. It would be like, wow, yeah, this helps with everything. But in a larger, more global context now, we might have access to other things that are stronger that we can use instead, so it's kind of fallen out of favor. Wild blackberry and raspberry, of course that's growing everywhere around here, and people think about the fruits and all the benefits that come along with fruit, of course antioxidants, vitamins, etc. But the leaf is really medicinal on both of those plants. They have a tannin content that's astringent, so in particular it's been found to have a tonifying effect, and especially relating to the vascular system. So you'll see raspberry leaf a lot in women's health formulas because of helping deal with like cramps and things like that, because of regulating cycle based on toning the uterus and the bladder and other tissues. But then we're crossing over into vascular health too, so that's not to say that it couldn't have application for men as well, where it might be involved in heart tonics. And then red or purple clover, traditionally it's called red clover, but it's really more purple in color than it is red, is known to be antispasmodic for coughs, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic. There's been some really cool studies on that fact. Whoa, this clover's fighting cancer, and they verified it by science. In particular, they've done some research with it in relation to prostate health. It's also a phytoestrogen, so here we are balancing male and female. For people who, if you're dealing with menopause and soy can be useful, you're trying to balance the estrogen-progesterone ratio. But a lot of people are allergic to soy, or they don't want to use soy because it's a heavily GMO crop or a heavily sprayed crop, or maybe they're just concerned that its phytoestrogen effects might be too strong. The red clover offers a soy alternative, and it's actually in the legume family, so ecologically we're talking again about nitrogen fixing, and that's why clover actually is common in cover crop mixes.